Unlock the Power of Employee Advocacy. This podcast explores the 6 steps to building a winning advocacy strategy.
Welcome to the Just Add Social podcast. Hello, great to see you tuning into yet another Just Add Social podcast. Our resident social media expert is Clive Roach, and he is the host for this episode.
Thanks for the introduction, Aria. And the topic for today is employee advocacy, and I've been involved with a few employee advocacy projects over the years. And I think one of the things that is really important to note is that employees can really amplify your brand's reach. So first of all, let me introduce you to as the social savvy scale. So in this podcast, we have a way to describe how advanced the topic is. So we provide this number up front in the podcast description and at the start of each podcast, so it enables you to get a heads up as to the depth of detail and experience needed to really build on the insights from this podcast. So the scale is from 1 to 10, 1 being the beginner's level and 10 is advanced. So Aria, please tell us, what is the social savvy scale for this topic of the podcast today?
Savvy social scale 1 to 10. This is easily level 3.
We have only 2 sections for this podcast. And the first one is about the tool, because the other 6 are really nothing to do with the selection of the tool. And that's where I really want to emphasize that actually doesn't really matter what tool you have. The 6 success factors I'm going to talk about are independent of that. So let's just talk about tools first. So the first chapter is a very quick one about the tool selection. So years ago, my first employee advocacy tool that I had to launch in my company was LinkedIn Elevate, and that was a famous one. And I worked very closely with the very good folks at LinkedIn for that, and we had that really linked up to our careers work, and so we had a very good measurement system in place. So when we made, as employees, posts for the employee advocacy, they were tracked in relationship to people coming to our careers sites, looking for jobs, applying for jobs even, and being successful for that. And it was very, very good measurement, because I remember I'd wake up in the morning, there would be an update on my phone and it would say, your recent employee advocacy posts have contributed to X number of people coming to the careers website and even one applying for a job. So the measurement of it was very, very good. So that was a very good project to be involved in. But LinkedIn sunsetted LinkedIn Elevate, replaced it with a free tool, which they've now sunsetted as well. So the second tool, the free tool, went in November 2024. But there are a lot of tools out there that you can use. There's an awful lot. And I remember interviewing lots of these suppliers and really getting into what they do. And so some really good tools out there. And that you can link to so many things. Not only just have a tool and launch it, but you can link it to your internal messaging systems and lots of things like that, and teams and things like that. So I just want to be very quick here and just say I'm going to put a link in the description of this podcast to a very good list that I liked, that I found from Gartner, and it lists some of the employee advocacy tools that you can choose from. So have a look at that link. It's in the description. That's enough said about tools, because now the success factors that I'm going to be talking about, the 6 success factors, are independent of your tool choice. I think you really like the fact, Aria, don't you, that these success factors are independent of the tool, right? So you don't have to go and rush to buy the most expensive tool. I think that's what we talked about before the podcast, that you like that.
Yes, Clive. We talked about it before recording the podcast.
Yes, we did.
Nice that the success factors are, how many again?
Yeah, the number 6, actually.
Yes, that the 6 are independent of the tool selection.
Yes, totally agree with you, Aria. Wonderful. Let's dive into chapter 2 then. Let's look at the 6 steps to building a winning advocacy strategy. Let's start with
1.
Yes, indeed. And number 1 is find an executive sponsor. So I do think this is an important one. So all social media breakthrough projects need some kind of solid, enthusiastic executive sponsor. Really does help. And I'm saying you can start one without that, but I'm talking about a success factor. So to really have it really successful, I think you do have to have this. And they provide an essential drive and leadership, and they might also be the financial sponsor. They don't have to do that, right? They could be like the HR, somebody from HR that becomes the lead for this in terms of the executive sponsor. Doesn't matter actually where the background's from, but as long as you've got somebody who's an executive leading it, whether they put the financial backing behind the project or not, and somebody else does, that doesn't matter. So I think step 1 is that. Okay, now let's deal with number
2.
Yes. Here I think it's important to appoint a social media admin. So naturally you will have a project manager and a team that includes or has access to people from IT, legal and privacy, etc. That is a given. My advice is to not appoint one of those people to be the first admin, the social media admin of the employee advocacy tool. I think it's good to have somebody who understands social, is really keyed up on the value of sharing and commenting and likes, and it's just not something you just do. I think you have to have somebody who's social media savvy. So I suggest to appoint somebody to be your social media admin lead who actually gets things going when it comes to actually using the tool, and ideally that person should also be one of your social media marketeers so that they are fully aware of what the ultimate goal is and what it means to the company. That's what I like. I like that role, so I could really explain it in a way. We're doing this not because we just want our employees to join in, but we want to also have business success, right? We want to also be able to have our campaigns being more successful, and to have somebody to explain that to people who are wanting to join or saying, well, why should I join this? To be able to say, look, for your unit, this is how we're going to set it up, so that although your unit is small, you have a great product, and I think that employees can really add something to the reach, right? And explain it in a way that person says, right, I understand the business significance of doing this. That's why I think you need to have a social media marketer as your first admin, and the person who, when you launch, is the person who's the face of it, irrespective of the project manager and everything else. Okay, next one, number
3.
Yes, and this one is about the content, and specifically the content curators. So carefully select curators to provide the content to be recommended to employees. The most efficient, and the way that I've done it in the past, is to select the very same people who create the content normally day to day. So make sure that they populate the application with lots of content so that when the first employees sign up, there are many interesting articles for them to choose from. And so the reason why I say that is because if those people who create that content, who are working with the marketing or comms teams and are creating the content that is then used in the packaging or leaflets or the website, will also put something aside, maybe slightly different worded text to it. Maybe they get a writer to kind of tune it a little bit for employees, so that it's shareable for employees. That's one of the other things, right? Not all content that goes on a website or a packaging is good for employees to share. So you need to tweak the wording a little bit. Makes it easier for more employees to share it. So That to me, I've always found that to be a great success point, rather than having somebody who has to go around and chasing people. Can I have some content? So I think make the same content curators as normal, make them content creators for your employee advocacy tool. And it also means, I like to sell things to people in a win-win situation. So it also means that when you try and get those people on board, you actually say why it's important for them to supply content here, because now they're going to get reach, extra reach, because those people are really interested about the success of their content. So if you convince them that the extra times that they now set aside to create content for the employee advocacy tool will do them good in the long run, right? And now move on to the next one.
Okay.
4.
Yes, appointing ambassadors. Step 4 of the success steps. And this one, I think is quite an important one. So employee advocacy ambassadors has a nice sound to it. Now, I have sat through many event presentations where companies have given their employee advocacy ambassadors special names like Blue Angels and things like this, because that was the brand color for that particular famous company. But this makes them very recognizable in the company, and they will be among the first to use the employee advocacy tool. So their activity will also populate the analytics section, so the first proof points can be seen when people join. However, the role of the ambassador is much more long-term. They will be the regional or the business contacts that can talk locally to people and share success use cases and get more employees signed up. So, for example, if you have a branch in Thailand, it's easier to have somebody in Thailand as an employee advocacy ambassador, to have somebody there to say, look, we want to have as many of you promoting the content that's in Thai, because that's one of the things that we can expand the reach of the regional content and the campaigns coming out of Thailand. And the same for the US and Germany. It's easier to do that with local coordinators, or ambassadors in this case, than to have just somebody central and say to contact all the employees everywhere and trying to get them to sign up. So I think that is a really good success factor to get more people on board quicker than just having one ambassador for the whole tool, for the whole company. So I've seen it work. I've actually made it work with that kind of regional distribution or business distribution of ambassadors than just one person trying to do it. Okay, 2 more success points.
Gosh.
I wonder what they are. Here is number 5, I think it is, isn't it?
Okay.
5.
Yes, and here it's all about training materials. The creators and ambassadors must be fully trained on how to use the employee advocacy tool. They need to be aware of the other content types available that can be shared, like employee milestones and company news. It's good practice to develop a mix ratio of these content types. Each company will have a different view as to the best mix of each type of content. So you've got promotional product information, you've got news, as I've said before. There could be lots of different types of content. So you probably might not find that just having all product content, that might not win. You might not get enough of the employee people who signed up just sharing just product stuff. And you might not want to get, you might see that not all of them want to share just comms related things. So there will be a mix. That's what I mean by finding the good content mix, seeing what works, and then deciding we're going to make a decision. We want the majority of the content to be this, because that's what they like to share in Thailand, or Germany might have a different mix, or your employees in the US might have a different mix, but then the local ambassadors can really control that mix in the tool for better success. So make sure you have in your tool categories of content that you can therefore track to see, well, which categories of these contents that we have is most successful. And therefore you can then ask your content creators, look, we want more of this or whatever, right? So really think about how that content mix is going to go, and then the training materials, and have videos and little snippets, and also have little handy guides and things like that can be really easily distributed, so that people really feel, right, okay, if I just want to know how to do it, I don't have to watch an hour-long video. I can just see 5 minutes on this aspect of how to use the tool. And make sure that you have Q&As, FAQs regularly, and in places maybe in your internal messaging system or internal portals, so people can think, there's my question, how to use the tool, if it's applicable that I can share this content. Have that available, so it gets people to have less questions, and then they get going and use the tool. And that brings me to my very last success factor, and this is number
6.
Yes, and if you know me by now, I'm really hot on measurement, and I think that's a really important topic. In the early days of being part of the first rollout of employee advocacy applications, I found it essential to get a grasp of the analytics. So at Philips, the early results gave us confidence. That was the first tool I had, LinkedIn Elevate at Philips. And we found that by using employee advocacy applications, employees were sharing at the rate of 4 times an average post. So for me, I tracked the average post that we had, and in this particular instance, it was from communications. How did that work? That was a typical post we put into the employee advocacy tool. Then I looked at when the employees shared in total that post or similar post to that, and then I could see how much reach we had obtained by putting an average post into the tool. And that was a great game changer for me, for being able to say, if we take a normal post that we just send out without employee advocacy, and we put it in the employee advocacy tool, this is, I know, I worked that to be the minimum, because sometimes I had more than times by 4. I had times by 6, maybe sometimes times by 8. I could say on average, or the minimum, extra reach we can look to enjoy is this. And it really does get stakeholders, it gets the executive sponsor going, and it gets the users going, it gets the campaign managers going, the content owners going, to really see the value of it. And make sure that all the tracking's in place so you can come up with these success case studies. I think that's really, really important. So the results are normally increased page followers, company page views, and new hires. There's lots of different KPIs that you can decide to have. Say my first one was about new hires when I use LinkedIn Elevate, but it can be lots of different things. In a later iteration of employee advocacy, it was share of voice. So looking at a B2B example and a very specific B2B product, the posts that were put into employee advocacy really did have an amazing effect on the share of voice contribution of that brand that we had compared to our competing brands. And of course, you should look at it as that the employees that work for the company that I was with at that time are connected to industry, peers and colleagues and past companies and things like that. So when they share it, they are sharing it often to people who are interested in that product. So yes, I did have some people who flippantly go, well, it's just an employee. What does that mean? But they're connected to the right people as well. So their views, their shares really do add up. And it's important, therefore, to also add another level of tracking, so you can see a shared post that's gone out via employee advocacy and done its work out there. Can you see that back in your measurement system to see effectively, here are all the reaches, all the clicks, all the reactions, all the comments that have come from an employee advocacy tool share. And if you can get down to that level of tagging and that level of reporting, then it's marvelous. And you can really get to an ROI calculation Yeah. So this taught me a valuable lesson from the outset. Ensure that the measurements are in place to check if the social strategy and executive sponsor objectives have been met, and share those tangible business results and value that it gives them in the form of ROI. And that's my key takeaway for the measurement success factor. Very good. Right, I think we can move on now to the last part. Okay, so Aria, maybe you could introduce what is the last part of this podcast.
Counting you in. Ready? On my mark. 3, 2, 1.
Yes, so for this key takeaway, I'm going to look at what does employee advocacy really give us as a business. Employee advocacy is the promotion of an organization by its staff members, right? So an employee advocate, if you think of it that way, an employee advocate is someone who generates positive exposure and raises awareness for a brand through digital media or offline channels. Because I say offline channels as well because word of mouth is also very powerful, right? So the whole brand recommendation happening that you can't measure effectively with these tools, but acknowledge that it happens as well over dinner tables, meetings, off-site meetings and things like that. It works as well there as well. Also, another aspect is that the employee advocate recommends a company's products or services to friends or family members, as I've just said, but also, of course, to peers in the industry, colleagues, and potential customers and existing customers. Employee advocates represent the best interests of the company, both internally and externally. So it's also important to realize that sometimes where you use an influencer, yeah, they're paid, but the employee advocate strongly supports the company, and so their enthusiasm often radiates out through their employee posts. And I think it's really good to make sure that you have employee advocacy tools that allow employees to top and tail the standard suggested texts, so it becomes more like them. You can see the personal characteristic of the person coming through. If they can just say, the first line and maybe the end line is what I recommend, and maybe a little bit in the middle, but at least the beginning and the end should sound like that person, then all the messages don't look the same, and it really does come across as authentic. So an employee advocate can also help to have that kind of ownership of their shares and their sharing and their reach, and how it's contributing to a brand or a product line or whatever else. I have often found that if you tell employees what their contribution is doing, they feel that sense of pride. So do tell them. And lastly, an employee advocate of your product or service is a credible spokesperson for the company in the end. We are saying, yes, we have maybe 2 or 3 official spokespeople, but now we've got thousands. So make sure you train them, you communicate to them, you give them some guidelines or rules as well. That should be part of the training. But now you've got thousands of spokespeople where you only had 1 or 2 before. And that's it for today's podcast episode. Remember, just adding social is the perfect way to turn offline or digital efforts into measurable success. So don't hesitate, get social and watch your results grow. And that's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me too.
And we'll see you in the next podcast. Take care. Bye-bye.